Welcome back to the Keep It Kula Podcast. My name is Jaclyn Kula, and today I have on a very special guest. He wrote for Sports Illustrated from 1989 to 2018, joined NBC Sports in 2018 before retiring in 2024. He has been named as the National Sports Writer of the Year 3 times and is the author of 5 books, with number 6 coming out later this year. Welcome to the show, legendary sports writer, Peter Kang. Peter, thank you for coming on. How are you doing?
Jaclyn, I'm doing great. Thanks for the introduction. I love the name of your pod.
Thank you. I appreciate
Very
that.
good.
I was blessed with an amazing last name of Kula, and I had to use it somehow. So it's the podcast name. I created this name when I about 5 years ago, and it's stuck. It's
Very good.
sticking forever. So I appreciate
Hey,
that.
Jaclyn, can I tell you that I was at Game 6 of the World Series?
Really. Okay,
Yeah.
I think we're gonna switch up what we're gonna talk about to start off the podcast because I actually
Well,
know
that's
you.
the
So
first. Well, I go to the World Series every year,
yeah.
almost every year. It's just my kind of recess day from my job, and now that I'm retired, it's a lot easier. But so over the years, I don't know, I've probably gone 18 of the last 20 years to a game of the World Series. And this World Series, Toronto was the last stadium I had not been to. And so like I've been to every major league ballpark other than Toronto. And so I said, oh, this will be cool. I'll get to go to my last stadium. And then on top of it, I know it probably kind of broke the hearts of people there, but on top of it, I saw a really, really good game. So anyway, that was fun. And the city, I'll tell you one thing, that was a treat to see that game in that city with that level of love for the home team. I can just imagine, I said to my buddy who I went to the game with, I can just imagine if the Maple Leafs ever win,
Gosh.
because that city will go out of its gourd if the Maple Leafs ever win. And that was like the first, we're walking out of the stadium, and I said, man, imagine if the Maple Leafs won. But that was just a really fun thing, and the city is so great. It was so much fun to be there. So anyway, apropos of nothing,
Listen, I
that
oh
was
I saw you rocking the Blue Jays World Series hoodie, so you were
yeah.
technically cheering for Toronto?
Well, I have to say, my one of my really good friends, the guy who edited my column for 13 years, a guy named Don Bonvisuto, I got 2 tickets, so I invited him. He lives in Nashville, but he's a lifelong Dodger fan, and I was kind of rooting for the Blue Jays quietly, but he was really, obviously, he's rooting for the Dodgers. So I'm lucky because most years, because I'm a Red Sox fan,
Mhm.
most years when I go to the series, I really don't care who wins. And I'm just happy. I want to see a good game. So anyway,
Yeah, it
it
was
was good.
terrific. I went to a bunch of games. I was at game one of the World Series where the Jays
Wow.
won the game, so that was amazing. But yeah, after game six and game seven, I was heartbroken. I do, you mentioned your Red Sox, so I went to the game yesterday, Jays Red Sox. I'm sorry about your Red Sox, you guys. Your team is going through it right
I
now
know.
with
I mean, we're a bad ball club. We're
the
a bad
firing of your manager. Just
ridiculous.
there's a lot going on. There was a lot of high hopes for the Red Sox. I apologize, but I'm very happy to see the Red Sox be playing bad right now because that means that the Jays are not in last place. And I
Uh,
love the Blue Jays more than honest. Like you see, I have Giant stuff in the background, so we will be talking about that as well. But I love my Blue Jays so deeply. So yeah, with the Red Sox though, you were offered to cover baseball earlier in your career and you
yeah.
declined it because of your love for baseball. Do you regret declining to cover baseball, or did you end up losing passion for football as well when you were reporting on football?
Oh, not at all. No, I love. I mean, look, I've been out of it now for 2 years, and every Sunday at 1 o'clock, I live in Brooklyn, and I'm sitting at my in front of my TV watching Scott Hansen in Red Zone and really geeking out on the NFL. I love football. I didn't stop doing this because I fell out of love with football. I just thought 40 years doing one thing, covering one game, enough already. And there's probably a little bit more in life Yeah, the bottom line, and we can talk about anything, but the bottom line is when you walk off the stage in college at graduation, or when I did, I never thought, well, you'd be doing one thing for the rest of your life, and that's almost what I did. Covered the NFL for 40 of my 45 years as a 44 years as a sports writer, and I just thought, there's got to be something else. I just don't want to. There are too many friends of mine who are very, very close to Paul Zimmerman and Don Banks, most notably, kind of died in the saddle. And I just wanted to experience other things in life. So baseball, when I was a kid, I grew up halfway between Boston and New York, and grew up a Red Sox fan, and my dad was a huge Ted Williams fan. And so my father and I would go out in the yard and play catch. He was the driving influence in my life in so many ways. So I was totally into baseball. And I always thought, man, I want to be Peter Gammons when I grow up. And, but when I went, my first job out of college was in Cincinnati. It's kind of the last guy on the sports staff of the Cincinnati Enquirer. Big Reds town at the time in 1980. And so for a time, I was backup beat person on the Reds. And I absolutely loved it. I loved everything about it. I went on one road trip a year for 3 years. I just thought it was the coolest thing, the rhythm of baseball and all that. But there's something about baseball that there were, at the time that I started, that was in 1980, there were 4 papers that covered the Cincinnati Reds every day. 2 in Dayton, Ohio, and 2 in Cincinnati. The 4 main beat people for those papers were all guys, and they were all divorced. And I thought, well, they were all kind of married to the job and totally into it. And, look, I don't know that if I became a baseball beat writer that I would have been a bad husband or father or whatever, but I just decided, hey, let's do football. And so that led me to cover the Bengals for 1 year and then go to New York after that. But I did have a chance at SI in the mid to late 90s to write the Inside Baseball column after writing Inside the NFL for a while. And I decided at that time I was really getting in a groove as far as I felt like I knew a lot. I knew everybody in the NFL. I felt like I was really at the top of sort of the information ladder or near it. And so I just didn't want to leave. And so I would have loved covering baseball. I know that I would have loved it. And it would have been a lot more sane at Sports Illustrated, but at the time, I was really just having too much fun covering football.
So you were with the Bengals for a bit, and then you went to the Giants. What's the biggest difference from covering Bengals in Cincinnati to then being in New York or Jersey and covering the Giants?
Well, in Cincinnati, there were basically 4 people who covered the team every day. And when I went to New York, I remember went to my first training camp. It was at Pace University in Pleasantville, New York, Westchester County, north of New York City. And I remember the first couple of days, there were 40 or 45 reporters there. And I figured it out like in my first week on the job. 19 newspapers. I mean, just remember, this was 1985. 19 newspapers covered the Giants every day. And so I just decided that I really had to do something to kind of separate myself. And I remember I asked my wife if she would just do me a favor, if I could just live at training camp for a month at the time, training camps were a little bit longer. They were like 5 weeks long. And I remember she said, yeah, go ahead. We had one young daughter at the time, and my wife was pregnant with our second child. And I said, man, if you just give me this month. So she said, okay. So anyway, I just went, and I was there every morning at camp, 6 days a week. I was there every morning at 7 o'clock. I'd beat some of the coaches in. And one day, Bill Parcells, I had introduced myself to him. And one day, Bill Parcells said to me, he does a double take. This is like the 6th or 7th day. And he takes a look at me and he goes, who the F are you? And I said, Bill, I introduced myself to you on the start of Camp Peter King. I work for Newsday. And he says, what are you doing here right now? And I said, Bill, honestly, there's 19 papers who cover this team. I want to win. I want to be the best one. And so I'm going to work at it. And so you're going to see me. And he shook his head and he walked out of the room. But it was crazy. That was kind of the beginning of a good relationship because Parcells always, we had our problems, some pretty big ones. But Parcells really kind of respected the fact that I wasn't just going to get in line with the other beat guys, that I was going to probably try to work at it so that early on I'd be able to win.
You know, you grew up as a Giants fan as well. I grew up as a Giants fan. Your father was a Giants fan. My father was a Giants fan. My parents are both from Montreal, and so the games that they would always kind of get at, you know, my dad would always get Giants games the way that Toronto gets Bills games. So I was thrown into it, and my dad loved that 80s team, obviously Lawrence Taylor, just Carl Banks, Phil Simms. I know when you were covering them, you didn't see yourself as a fan. You saw yourself as a reporter. Watching the team win the Super Bowl, though, can you take me back to that moment? And was there something inside of you that was just really happy to see them win? Or did you just keep it professional inside as well?
When I got the job in 1985, my father, here was the autumn Sundays at the King House in Enfield, Connecticut. The three boys would go out in the yard starting at like 7 o'clock. We'd have to take an hour off to go to church. And then we'd get back and we would hurry up and we would have the vast majority of the yard raked we had huge trees in our yard. And my father, we raked every other weekend in the fall. So we would have to get the yard raked before we could watch the games. And finally we convinced our dad, okay, so let's get everything done, as much done by 1 o'clock as we can, then watch the game and we'll come back out at like 4:15 to finish. So he was okay with that. But it was just a great tradition in our house that even though the Giants teams, that was like late 60s, early 70s, were pretty bad, we just loved watching the Giants. So my dad, I remember I called him in like maybe June of 85 when I got this job. And I said, Dad, you'll never guess, we're moving back east from Ohio. We're going to move. And I got a job covering the Giants for this paper on Long Island called Newsday. And he said, oh my God. He was just thrilled. He said, you'll get to meet LT. You'll get to meet Simms. You'll get to talk to Parcells. And I said, Dad, yeah, I get to do that, but I'm not a fan. I'm not doing that. And he was like surprised. And I said, Dad, this is my profession. I'm not rooting for this team anymore. I can't. And so I know that sounds weird to people because everybody thinks, well, deep down inside, you must be happy. And, you know, you ask about when they won the Super Bowl. That was the second year I covered them. It was really kind of unfortunate. Late after my first year, my father, who had lung cancer, died in February after the first year I covered the Giants. They were in the playoffs. They'd lost. I came home for a couple of weeks, and he was in bad shape, and he died early February of 86. And then the Giants went on to win the Super Bowl that season. And I remember just thinking, this is a crazy thing to say. I was in Pasadena watching them win the Super Bowl, and I was really kind of sad because I said, my father's waited for this day. My father never saw the Giants win a Super Bowl, and he was waiting for this day, and it never happened. And I was just a little melancholy, quite honestly, because here they are winning, just 1 year after he dies. But look, that was a great, great experience to be able to cover. The big thing about covering the Giants when a New York team wins the Super Bowl, like, you are just on call. It just never ends. But it was fun, and it was really energizing, and I loved it. There's a lot of really good guys on that team. One day in '86, I was standing by Harry Carson's locker waiting to talk to him after the game, and I look over, and there's Richard Nixon, in a camel hair coat and a houndstooth fedora, waiting to talk to Harry Carson also. And he looked at me, and he goes, man, I said, hi, Mr. President, I'm Peter King with Newsday. And he goes, man, I wish I had your job. And it's the only time in life that I ever came through with a good line to a really famous person. I said, man, I'm glad I didn't have yours. And, but I don't know, at the time, this sounds crazy. It wasn't that weird to see Richard Nixon in the locker room because everybody loved the Giants at that time.
So did you see just tons of celebrities all the time in that locker room?
I mean,
or just at games?
I wouldn't say tons, but it was interesting. Parcells was close to Bobby Knight. Yeah. And one day, Bobby Knight, before a game, they were going to play the Eagles. And we all heard, hey, Bobby Knight's at the game. And afterwards, we talked to a few guys in the locker room, and one of the players, LT, had no use for the press. So it wasn't like he was going to give up many secrets, but one of the guys in the locker room said, one of the all-time great scenes before the game, Bobby Knight is walking through, and Taylor looks at him, and who could say this to Bobby Knight? But Taylor just calls out, hey, there's the chair thrower. And for those who don't know the story, Bobby Knight, probably one of the biggest rotten things he ever did in his career was when he was coaching Indiana. He got so mad at the officials one day that he took his chair on the sidelines and he threw it on the court, and it went skittering across the court. I think he got thrown out. I'm sure he got thrown out. But anyway, who else? Tell me how many people on God's green earth could yell out, hey, there's the chair thrower about Bobby Knight and live to tell about it. But
I think the one person is Lawrence Taylor.
Yeah, Lawrence Taylor. Yeah, you're right.
So you mentioned Taylor, never really liked talking to the press. You've wrote about how, he never got close enough to writers and reporters. What do you mean by he never got close enough? Was it just he kind of wanted to keep things to himself, or he was hiding things a lot?
He had no interest in playing the press game. The only guy in the media he really liked, not that he was demonstrably hateful to us, but it was just, he just didn't care. He did what he had to do. I think the only guy he really liked in the media was John Madden. He loved John Madden. And but everybody else, he did the job that he had to do, And there are guys like that in the press or in the public eye, ball players in all sports who, view it as a necessary evil part of the job, which is fine. I don't ask anybody to love us or anything. They don't have to. It's not their job. Their job is just to play, and we write about them. But yeah, he viewed it as taking his medicine, really, when he had to stand and talk to the press.
I know you had a pretty good relationship with Phil Simms. Was there anyone else in that locker room that really stood out, whether it was when talking to the media or just how they treated others?
I really liked Harry Carson. I love George Martin as a guy. I like Jim Burt. I really like Joe Morris. Maurice Carthon was a prince. But, I would say probably the guy, and, I got along with Simms really well. He was he loved the gossip of the game. He was into everything. He wanted to know what was going on all over the league. He was just really into it. Harry Carson was just a very serious dude. And he was a great leader, a fantastic leader. And there were so many good guys on that team. Parcells and George Young. George Young did a really good job of assembling a team where the vast majority of guys were just really good human beings and great team guys.
Was Bill Belichick friendlier back then?
Much. Belichick was awesome in those days. He was serious and he was quiet, but if you stopped him in the locker room, he was. In those days, we didn't have the embargo. I mean, look, I hate to say, oh boy, back in the day, what an incredible, how great it was to cover football. It was so much better. Well, it was, but so what? Wah, wah, wah. Cover the sport and just whatever it is, it is. But Belichick was very open. One of the reasons why I think Bill was as open as he was because he felt like, I think he felt like we might be able to help him get a head coaching job one day. Mm. And I remember I talked to Art Modell in 1990 about Belichick. And I don't know if I helped him or hindered him, but at the time I knew Modell pretty well because I was covering the league for Sports Illustrated. Mm-hmm. And he knew that I had covered Belichick, so he talked to me before he hired Bill. And a lot of people, even before he had his first term with the Browns when it was kind of a debacle, a lot of people were really down on Bill because he was really kind of a taciturn, quiet, kind of reticent guy. But, I mean, it's a weird thing to say. I used to tell people, listen, Belichick is great to deal with because he will explain as much as he can. And he explains it so he wants you to understand it. He's not just putting in his time. He really kind of wants you to understand stuff. And so I really got along well at the time with Belichick.
You stopped writing for the reporting for the Giants. You went over to Sports Illustrated. Why did you know that was the right move for you at the time?
Well, in 1989, for people who, obviously, Jaclyn, you and your friends, and even people 5, 10, 15 years older than you wouldn't know this necessarily, but in 1989, if you work for Sports Illustrated and you went to cover a football game, all doors were open.
So different now.
Everybody would talk to you. When I used to go to games, I remember in 1989, 49ers at Eagles. I was doing a story on the 49ers and the PR guy says, just come over to our hotel Saturday morning, be there at 8:30 and you can ride the bus, you can ride the players bus on the way to our practice, our walk-through practice. I mean, and so I'm sitting on the bus 2 rows behind Joe Montana. It just was a different day. Second or third year, I go into Dallas. It's a Friday afternoon. I walk in the locker room and Michael Irvin yelled out, "Hey guys, we're at a Sports Illustrated game this week." I mean, it was just a different world. So I mean, in the first place, I never thought in 9 million years I would ever write for Sports Illustrated. Ever, ever, ever. I never even viewed it as a life goal. I said, I'm not Dan Jenkins. I'm not any of these incredible Curry Kirkpatrick, and I'm none of these great writers that they have at SI. Forget it. I'd be very happy covering the NFL, working for newspapers and doing whatever. I never even when Mark Mulvoy, the managing editor, called me in 1989, I fell on the floor. I was shocked. I just never really thought it was a possibility. But obviously, once you get somewhere, you pinch yourself, but then you say, okay, it's time to work. And they didn't hire you to be gee whiz. They hired you to be good at the job.
You mentioned Joe Montana, Michael Irvin. Were there any players that you felt a little starstruck when you met them or you were doing a piece on them?
I never really did ever. I just felt like, even going back to my time in Cincinnati, I remember introducing myself to Johnny Bench, and Tom Seaver at the time was on the Reds too. I remember talking to them, and my father at the time was, oh my God, you met Bench and Seaver? Oh my God, and all that. I just never looked at it that way. I said, they have a job to do, so do I. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I just never felt like I needed to. I don't even mean genuflect. I just always felt, this is my profession. That is your profession. Here I am. So let's deal with each other.
When you graduated with your journalism degree, you were possibly going to go into politics. What led you into sports instead?
Well, I was thinking that, because I was the managing editor of my school paper at Ohio University, that it would be really cool. I was I was a child of Watergate. Mm-hmm. My senior year in high school, I played soccer, and my first practice in August of 1974, I came home and my mother and father were watching Richard Nixon resign the presidency on television. And it was all because of Watergate. And I thought to myself, wow, imagine the power of being a good reporter. And so I just always thought, man, I would love to do what Woodward and Bernstein did, even at the local level. So I just thought, okay, maybe I'll get a job in Columbus, Ohio, covering the State House or something. I thought that would really be fun. And then I guess I got a break. My intern editor at the Cincinnati Enquirer, when I was after my junior year in college, got the job as sports editor of the paper at the Cincinnati Enquirer, and he hired me as a general assignment reporter after I got out of college. So, had he never been there, or had he gotten the job, on City Desk and wanted to hire me, I would have gone in and covered some neighborhood in Cincinnati. I didn't feel like I had to be a sports writer to make my life fulfilled.
When you were with Sports Illustrated, you asked former Jacksonville defensive lineman Austin Lane after being cut to write a story for Sports Illustrated. Why was that so intriguing to you?
Well, that was at the time that was 2013 when I founded this, we called it an NFL microsite at Sports Illustrated called the MMQB. I wrote a column called Monday Morning Quarterback at the time, every Monday, this long column about the NFL. And SI offered me the chance to have my own staff to cover the NFL my way. And my thought in covering the NFL my way is that I wanted to get closer to players. I wanted to get more inside the game than we were. I hired Richard Sherman that first year to write a weekly column for us. At the time, he was unfamous. but I knew that the Seahawks were rising, and Richard Sherman was an incredibly bright guy, went to Stanford. He was a star in the making, and it turns out that was a pretty good call because Richard Sherman ended up being not only a good player, but a controversial player, and wrote a lot of really interesting columns for us. But so in that first year, I wanted to write stories that were in players' voices. And I wanted to write stories that were inside the game that hadn't been done before. And so around the cut down date, early in my tenure of running the MMQB, I wanted to find out from a player what it was like to get cut. You know, we always talk about, oh my God, this guy who came from nowhere to make an NFL roster, and what an incredible story this is. What about the gut-wrenching experience of getting whacked by an NFL team and having your dreams dashed? What about that? So, I don't know. I asked a lot of questions to a lot of people I knew around the league. And I said, give me an outgoing guy who's not afraid. And so I found out this guy, Austin Lane, got a hold of him. He was a big defensive lineman. He got cut, and he bled all over the internet for 1,800 words about what it was like to get cut. It was a fantastic story, I thought. So those were kind of some of the things I wanted to do. Like I went that first year in November and spent a week with an NFL officiating crew, Gene Sterator's crew. And I went, and the NFL gave me permission. They had never allowed this before. I went to spend a day with 4 different guys on the Sterator crew. I went to Grand Rapids, Michigan with the back judge, Dino Paganelli, a single father of 3, who was an AP social studies teacher at a high school in Michigan, and went home with him after his day of teaching. And he had to be a dad, a single dad, had to get his 9-year-old daughter at the bus stop, you know? And then he had to stay up late to study his tape for the Bears-Ravens game that weekend. So those were the kind of stories I wanted to do that I think just shined a different kind of light on the NFL than we had seen.
Is there a favorite story that you've written throughout your career? Is there a specific one?
The story on the officials is far and away one of my favorites, because nobody had ever done it before. I really enjoyed, I took a bus ride across the United States with John Madden in a game week in 1990. That was enlightening because, I mean, I tell people Madden's just a guy. Yeah. You know, after you get over the bing, bang, boom and all that stuff, I mean, he's just a human being who stopped at the side of the road in the middle of Nebraska because he wanted to see these incredibly vivid red wildflowers. And I don't know, he was a lot different than you would think. He wasn't just all football. He talked about the human race a lot on that trip. That was fun. I did a story in 2015 on a week in the life of a quarterback with Carson Palmer. I was embedded with Palmer and the Cardinals. That was a blast because I sold it to Carson Palmer and I said, listen, you're getting near the end of your career, and one day you're going to want to show your 2 boys what your job was really like. And at the time, he was thinking, I got so much crap to do this week. I don't have time to deal with that. But he ended up being, I just finished a book and about my years covering the league, and I revisited a lot of old stories. That is one of the things that I revisited. And I asked him, Carson's now a high school football coach in Southern California. And I asked him, deep down now, I could tell you didn't really want to do the story, but you did it. And I said, look back and tell me. He goes, hey, listen, I got one kid who's a high school quarterback and one kid who's in 5th grade, and he wants to be a quarterback, who was just a baby then. And he said, I'm really glad I did it, because now they can read this to see, hey, if you want to do it at the highest level, here's what it'll take. So, yeah, those are 3 of my favorites.
Was there an NFL player that you really wanted to write about and you never did?
What a good question.
Thank you.
Well, I will say, I wrote about virtually every NFL player of note, probably every one in a 40-year period, but I don't consider that to be all that necessarily rewarding or anything. I consider some of the people who I would have loved spending a lot of time with to find out what made them tick. It was just very hard for me to do because, before I got to Sports Illustrated, guys did local stuff, but they didn't really do all that much national stuff. And I never really got to do much. As a matter of fact, late in his career and afterwards, I did a lot more with Joe Montana. Joe Montana was probably about 5 years before me in terms of me being able to really do something. I mean, I interviewed Montana, but I never really spent time with him. Like I went to Tom Brady's hideaway in Montana and spent time with him after that Super Bowl comeback against Atlanta. Mm-hmm. But I never did anything like that with Montana. I mean, I interviewed him, but I wouldn't say I was just a member of the pack. And he always fascinated me because I think he was one of those guys who feared nothing. And, it's funny, if you stand next to Joe Montana, he looks like an insurance salesman. Yeah. He's not a formidable guy or anything like that, but I really loved players like him who, against all odds, they just did it. That really appealed to me. The Brady story just appeals to me. Against all odds, he did it. The guy who got passed by every team in the league at least 5 times in the draft, stuck it up everybody's rear end. And that's one of the things that motivated him, And so those are the kind of stories that were fun to capture over the years.
If you were a new writer in the NFL now, which player would you be intrigued to write a story on, get to really know?
Oh, I would say, today, I think Mendoza's really an interesting guy because to me, he's an NIL baby.
Yeah.
He, if you think about it,
True.
He went from, being a high school football player in Miami, he wanted so badly to go to the University of Miami and be a Hurricane. And they wouldn't even let him be a preferred walk-on.
No.
And so he had to fight his way up the ladder. He had to go to, I don't know all his stops, but I know he went to Cal. Mm-hmm. And then obviously, he went to Indiana. Yep. And, think about it. A year ago at this time, Fernando Mendoza was a prospect of some sort, but nobody thought of him as like the first pick in the draft or even necessarily a first-round draft pick. And, he seems to have this very human streak about him with his mom, which I'm told is really quite legitimate. And also just the fact that Tom Brady said something when like a year after he took over for Bledsoe, they had won the Super Bowl, then they trade Bledsoe, and still some of the veterans are not big Brady guys on the team. And he made some enemies in that locker room. And he goes, I don't care that whatever he was, 24, 25 years old. He goes, I don't care I'm 24 or 25 years old. I'm the quarterback of the team. The quarterback of the team is the leader, like it or not. So I am going to have the authority to say things. And for better or for worse, you better listen to me. And that's not a cocky thing. It's real. The quarterback is the dude. And, I've heard enough from Fernando Mendoza to know that he has that little pissy streak about him that I think he's going to do a good job. Now, I'm not a big college football watcher. So I don't know whether he's going to succeed or fail, but I think he's got a really good chance. And we'll see.
Looking at the Giants now, do you consider yourself a Giants fan now because you're done with the reporting world?
Not really. No.
Too bad.
I don't really, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
I've been around, a guy I really root for a lot is Mahomes, because I've spent some time around him. I did a chapter in my book about the best partnership I've seen in the NFL in 40 years, and that's Andy Reid and Mahomes. Wow. And so I've spent a lot of time with Reid. I've known him since 1995 when he was tight ends coach in Green Bay. So I've known him for a long time, and I kind of glommed onto Mahomes early. And so I don't have the kind of relationship that I had with like either Manning or Brady, but I've got a decent relationship with Mahomes. And the thing I like about him is that he desperately wants to be great. Desperately. And he'll do everything in his power to be great. All I want, if I were a fan of a team, is I want the guys who I root for to want it worse than I do. Like if I root for the Red Sox, I want Trevor Story and Roman Anthony and Garrett Crochet and whoever is on the team, Yeah. I want them to want it more than I do. If they don't, take a hike, That's kind of how I feel. And Mahomes is one of those guys. Mahomes has not finished winning Super Bowls.
No.
That I will guarantee you. He's not finished winning Super Bowls.
How many would you say?
He's got a lot of Brady in him. Of all players in football, Mahomes is the most like Brady mentally.
What was the biggest difference from Reid and Mahomes' relationship to Belichick and Brady's relationship?
I mean, I guess I would say that the biggest, probably the biggest difference, and this is not a reflection on, because I think no matter what Tom Brady thinks now of Bill Belichick, and I do think he probably has some sour thoughts based on how it ended in New England.
Definitely.
Tom Brady, and I don't think Brady deep down either hates or really dislikes Belichick. I think deep down Brady understands that Belichick is a certain way because that's how he was raised in life. That's how he was raised in coaching. And if you don't like it, there's 31 other teams. And so I think their relationship was fine, but it was a business relationship. Okay? I think the Reid-Mahomes relationship is a business relationship, but here's a good example. One day, this is maybe 20 or 21, I forget when it was. Every Friday afternoon, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes meet in Reid's office to granularly go over the game plan, every play in the game plan. What do you like? What don't you like? What plays do you absolutely want me to call? What don't you love? Tell me right now. And so they'd go over everything. And one day, John Madden called him, Reed, because they were very close. And he said, Coach, I got somebody who wants to talk to you. And Mahomes was shocked. Oh my God, get on the phone with John Madden. At the time, he didn't know Madden. Yeah. And so he was just starstruck like a kid. Hey, Coach, how you doing? And and Madden said something to the effect of, oh my God, I think you're great. Man, I just love watching you play. I'm a huge fan. And Mahomes was just blown away. But all I'm saying is that Andy Reid wanted to sort of further Patrick Mahomes' football IQ, football education. He wanted him to really get to know people in the sport who, because he's going to be a huge star in the sport. Here, meet somebody from the coaching galaxy who now resides in Canton, Ohio. Here, you should know John Madden. And so that's the kind of thing. I mean, in other words, Reed kind of looks out for Mahomes. Mm-hmm. And that's a little bit different than the relationship that Brady and Belichick had.
Wow, that is very fascinating. I never would have known any of this. I've never heard any of this. This is amazing. You know, with Hall of Fame, you mentioned Hall of Fame. You see I have Eli Manning photo right there, Eli Manning helmet right there. Why is Eli Manning not in the Hall of Fame, Peter?
Well, I've said this. I'm not a voter anymore. I was a voter for 31 years, 32 maybe. Mm-hmm. Jeez, I forget now, 31 or 32. But I would vote for Eli Manning if I were still on the committee. The issue with Eli is that, and I may be slightly wrong, okay, but Eli played for 16 years. He won playoff games in only 2 years. And obviously, my point about him is that he has two of the most unlikely, biggest Super Bowl victories in history.
Yes.
Yes, the Giants' defense played a big role in each game, but Eli Manning, in the first Super Bowl, with the getting out of traffic, throwing the Velcro catch to David Tyree, then throwing the winning touchdown pass to Plexico Burress, then in the next Super Bowl, making the greatest throw of his life at one of the two or three biggest moments of his life. I think 38-yard pass down the left sideline to a blanketed Mario Manningham. Yep. And they go on to win that game. But the point I'm making overall is that Eli Manning was part of two of the great moments, great upsets, great victories in Super Bowl history. And not only that, even though he was never first-team All-Pro quarterback in the NFL, he retired as a top 10 statistical quarterback. Be all that as it may, I understand the questions that people have about him, but I think with what he did in the biggest moments, that would be enough for me.
I'm speaking bias, so I can't really say anything, but I definitely feel like Eli Manning should be in the Hall of Fame already, just based on my own, that's my fandom. When I became a Giants fan, it was Eli Manning, everything, posters, jerseys, my phone screensaver, everything Eli. So I am biased. So it's a good thing I'm not a voter right now because you shouldn't be biased. Yeah. But, going to your book, which is coming out later this year in October, I believe. Is it October?
That's right, October 13th.
So October 13th, The Game. It's your sixth book. What was the process like writing this and kind of revisiting everything that you've done?
Well, I retired 2 years ago, like 25 months ago. And I just decided I'm just going to sit back and see what I really want to do. There's nothing that really jumps out at me. I didn't have any plan in mind. Whatever happens, happens. So after about 6 months, I said, well, I'd like to do something. What would I like to do? And I have a book agent named David Black who really wanted me to write about my years covering the NFL. And I said, okay, I'm going to give it some thought. And I called some friends, one of whom is named Jeff Pearlman. People might know Jeff. He was a former SI writer. He now is a big kind of internet guy. He's very opinionated, but extremely smart, an excellent writer. He's written some great books. Wrote one on Favre, one on Walter Payton. I mean, he's written some great books. Anyway, I called him and I said, what do you think? If you know me, you know what I've done. And he had a great idea. He said, because I said, I just don't want to do Peter King's greatest hits. Mm-hmm. Oh, what did I do in 1991? Let's find. But he said, why don't you pick out one story from every year you've covered the NFL and take that one story and go back and report it over again? And I said, oh my gosh, I really like that idea. And so, for instance, free agency begins in 1993. Reggie White shocks the world. He goes from the Philadelphia Eagles to the Green Bay Packers. Mm-hmm. How in the world did that happen? I don't feel like we ever really got the truth about that. I think I have the truth about that. I think I know now exactly what happened. Truth be told, I think Reggie White wanted to go play for the 49ers. They didn't have the finances to pay him nearly what he could have made in Green Bay. So he ended up going to Green Bay, even though God told him, well, God will tell me where to go. I think God told him to go where the most money was. But anyway, there are stories like that. Every year I went back and I re-reported Nick Foles beating the Patriots in the Super Bowl. How on God's green earth did that ever happen? How did Nick Foles beat Belichick and Brady, especially when Brady threw for 505 yards? What happened? And I went over the whole story with him and Doug Peterson. Spent a long time with both of them. So the bottom line is I was able, because I'm not doing anything, I was able to take a week of my life and go down to Florida and see Jimmy Johnson and relive the Herschel Walker trade. What exactly happened in 1989, 90, and 91? What about the divorce with Jerry? So all of these things. And it was so much fun because so many people, Nick Foles said to me at one point, he goes, man, I'm really getting deep in the weeds on this. And man, I haven't told anybody this, but, and just things like that. When you really dive deep into stories that have been left alone for a few years or even decades, people really enjoy reliving some of the greatest moments of their lives. And conversely, you probably don't remember a guy named Giovanni Carmazzi, but in 2003, the San Francisco 49ers and Bill Walsh, who was running their draft unofficially, came up with this new quarterback from Hofstra. They drafted in the third round, Gio Carmazzi, and he turned out to be one of the great flops, and Bill Walsh swore by him. They drafted him, and he never played it down in the NFL. And so, there were things like that. And so Gio Carmazzi doesn't want to relive that point of his life. I found out where he was, where he lived. I sent a certified letter to his house. Really want to talk to you. He wouldn't talk. So, but anyway, I was able to do a lot of stories and relive a lot of stories that really were tremendously fun.
You retired 2 years ago, and yet you have this book coming out in October. Are you ever going to fully retire?
I don't know. I mean, I I enjoy. I'm still a curious person, and so, and one of the things is, you know, talking about that Eagles year. I mean, shoot, every writer in Philadelphia who, wrote anything has written a book on that year with the Eagles. So, and I skimmed quite a few books because I wanted to know what I was competing against, what I needed to write about that maybe people didn't know. But I don't know. I'm a competitive person, I'm a curious person. I'm happy to do something else if I find something in my life that is as interesting and fun. And I don't have any idea. Whatever happens next happens, but I don't really have any plans.
Would you go into covering baseball?
Probably not, because I'm not into the travel world anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, and look, I like traveling. One of my favorite things every year was my NFL training camp trip where I'd go to 20 camps in a 30-day span. And it was great. It was fun. I love traveling around the country. I love seeing the United States. But, I don't mean to say been there, done that, but been there, done that.
What's your favorite MLB stadium? Because you said you've been to every one now.
Well, I have to give you old time and modern. And I mean,
Okay,
old
yeah.
time, I love Wrigley Field. I love Fenway too, but I feel like I should disqualify Fenway because I'm a Red Sox fan. So of course I'd love Fenway.
Yeah.
But the one thing about Wrigley Field that I love is that I love sitting in the bleachers as much as I love sitting behind home plate.
Wow.
That's the coolest thing. I would say as far as the newer stadia go, I really like Coors Field. I don't just like the stadium itself. I like the experience. So I like sitting in the upper deck behind home plate at Coors Field and looking out at the Rocky Mountains. I think that's cool. I love PNC Park in Pittsburgh because if you sit midway up between home and third base, you can look out and get the most beautiful view of any downtown area in Major League Baseball. And those are two that I like. I really like T-Mobile Park in Seattle. I don't know. There's something good. I like Target Field in Minneapolis a lot. I think that's that's a kind of a hidden gem. I don't know. I like them all. I like just sitting there. I keep score at every game I go to. I like seeing the game, having two beers, and basically just sitting there and for 3 hours forgetting about the world.
Do you like Yankee Stadium?
I like it okay. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been conditioned my whole life to detest everything about the Yankees.
Me too.
And I don't. I mean, I love Jeter. I love Aaron Judge.
Yeah.
I don't know how. Other than if you were just a rancorous person, even you can hate the Yankees. You can't hate Derek Jeter or Aaron Judge. You just can't. I mean, they're everything that's good about sports, at least in my opinion. One of the things I like about Yankee Stadium is that it's really cool to sit all over the place. I like sitting with the bleacher creatures. I just like sitting anywhere in the stadium. It's good. It's really a lot of fun.
I've only ever been to Rogers Center, but this episode's going to be coming out this weekend. I'll be in New York
Wow.
for the weekend, seeing some Broadway shows with the family, but trying to convince them to do a Yankees game too.
Oh, you have to.
Yankees Orioles, so two teams that you and I both dislike, considering they're both in the AL East, but I do really want to go. And what would you say is the best section to sit in? Should we sit with the bleacher creatures or should we avoid that for our first try?
Well, it will be a profane experience out there, but it will be an interesting experience. That's definitely not a bad thing to do. You'll really get into the spirit of the place. One of the places I kind of like to sit, I like to sit between home and first base in the upper deck. Now, look, I don't know what the weather's going to be,
Yeah.
but if you sit between home and first base, you're not going to get any sun if you sit up high. So you might not want to do that because you might want to be a little warmer. But I think I would sit on the second level somewhere like down near the front, and you'll have a great seat and you'll have a great view of of the 4 and 6 trains. Or I'm sorry, the 4 and D trains going just beyond right field. But I strongly recommend take the subway to the game wherever you're
Yes.
staying in New York.
That's the plan already.
You gotta do that. It's just fun, and you'll be sandwiched in there. But it's just fun to go, and you may have a boisterous car, you may have a quiet car, but whatever, it'll be real life.
Would you recommend I don't wear any Blue Jays gear while I'm there?
I don't think it really I mean, if you wear Blue Jays stuff, you'll get some crap,
Yeah.
but you won't get a lot of crap. And look, people there don't, unless you're playing the team that day, unless it's the Red Sox, I don't think it's that big a deal wearing the other stuff. If you wear Red Sox stuff at Yankee Stadium, you're asking for trouble. It's like, wearing, I guess, wearing Canadian stuff if you're going to a Maple Leafs game.
Yeah. You know what? Thank you for that. I hope we're gonna go. I have to do a little convincing with everyone else, so I will definitely be planning on going, weather dependent as well. But Peter, my last question for you. You've been on so long, and I appreciate everything you've shared with me. This has been so amazing talking to you. I want to know your way too early Super Bowl prediction.
I will take the Rams over Buffalo.
Wow. Okay. You know what? I really like that pick. I must say.
Look, I if I knew, and I think Mahomes is going to play opening day. If I knew he was going to be vintage for 17 games, I'd say the Rams over the Chiefs. But the Chiefs got some holes now. And I think the Chiefs, in my opinion, are a little suspect in the secondary. And again, look, I understand the business of football, but I don't know that they replenished their secondary well enough in the off season. I think there's a lot of good candidates. I just think, listen, I think at the end of last year, the Rams were the best team in football.
Yep.
They just didn't prove it.
Yep. And we
And
saw
sometimes that happens. But I don't know that if I'm a Rams fan, if I can get over the 2-point conversion that decided the game in December, where a player walks into the end zone and picks up a ball on the ground, and after much deliberation, the officials and the replay booth said that's 2 points for Seattle. It was just, that's just one of the weirdest plays in recent NFL history. And that, in many ways, decided who got to the Super Bowl. And look, the Seahawks were a deserving Super Bowl champion.
Yep.
But if anything, if the Rams were playing at home in the playoffs, and if they had Seattle at home instead of playing in Seattle, let's see what happens.
Is there any concern, though, with the Rams taking a quarterback in the first round?
I thought it was a great pick. I mean, I make no phone calls. I make no anything. But look, I've been around the game long enough to know that Sean McVay, this is just my opinion. And again, I've not talked to Sean McVay, haven't talked to the Rams. So what do I know? I'm going to tell you what I think happened. What I think happened is that Sean McVay had to call Matthew Stafford and say, listen, there's a good chance we're going to pick a quarterback. This is zero reflection on you. We just got to be prepared. And whether he said anything like, not my choice, but hey, we got to do it. Whatever he said, in my opinion, what he did in the press conference after that was saying to Matthew Stafford, Matthew, you're my guy. I got your back.
Got it.
That's what I think happened. Do I know anything? Absolutely not. That's what I think happened.
Yeah, we will definitely see it play out. But Peter, thank you so much for coming on the show. We went for over an hour. I really appreciate you talking to me about so many amazing things. Your book, The Game, comes out October 13th. It's your 6th book. You can pre-order it now. Everyone go pre-order it now. And Peter, again, thank you.
No problem. Let's just keep it Kula.
We're just going to keep it Kula here. Always, forever. Again, Peter, thank you for coming on. Thank you all for watching. Subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.